Hello and welcome back to English for You. I'm Seb.
I'm Nikki.
And we are still talking about our amazing book for this month, The Secret Side of Empty. Okay, so we kind of got off to a bit of a difficult start, didn't we? We had empty. Right.
She's kind of struggling in her life.
Yeah, she's got a lot of struggles in her life. She's an illegal immigrant, and she has to keep that a secret.
And she also has an abusive father.
And it's also making her feel quite alone at school. So she has a lot of pressure. And I don't want to give away too much about day 2 of our story, but MT starts to have some problems with a thing called depression.
Depression is like a mental state that you feel very sad and down, unhappy.
You might feel like there's no point trying to do anything because everything just feels too difficult, or just you don't have any motivation. You feel very sad. A lot of people can have get depression, and they can have it for lots of different reasons. And so the book actually goes to quite a dark area when it's talking about MT's problems with depression, because it's told through her point of view and she's not telling anyone about how she's feeling. So I don't want to give too much away. We'll talk more about this as we go into the story. But yes, it's what I think one of the most important themes of this book aside from immigration. So let's get started and look at what happens to MT in the second half of this story.
Reading.
The Secret Side of MT. Early in the year, MT starts dating Nate, a wealthy boy from a nearby high school. In many ways, though, the two of them are from different worlds. Though Nate is loving and kind, MT becomes increasingly nervous about him discovering her big secret. This pushes them apart. Nate dumps her at the same time that her favorite teacher quits her job. Her father has also become more aggressive than ever. This takes MT to a very dark place. She loses interest in her classes and starts skipping school. As things get worse, she even considers suicide. MT keeps these thoughts from her friends and family, but she lets it slip to her best friend, Chelsea. As a result, the police arrive at MT's house and take her to see a therapist. It's then that MT finally opens up about her situation and her life as an illegal immigrant. She moves away from her parents' home. With help from Chelsea's family, she achieves her dream of going to college.
Okay, so we rejoin MT at the beginning of the school year. Early in the year, MT starts dating Nate, a wealthy boy from a nearby high school.
接续前一天的文章，课文继续往下说 MT 的故事。他开始和一名叫做 Nate 的男孩交往，而 Nate 是一名来自富裕家庭的男孩。这篇课文说 Nate, a wealthy boy from a nearby high school. 逗号后面的部分呢是同位语，意思就是补充说明或是提供一些额外的资讯，这种是非限定的用法。因为就算不补充后面，就是逗号后面的那一长串，我们也看得懂句子在说什么。也就是说MT 开始跟一名叫 Nate 的人交往，这样而已。那同位语其实是从关系子句所简化而来的。MT starts dating Nate, who is a wealthy boy from a nearby high school. 这边 who 后面所接的关系子句是用来补充先行词 Nate， 课文就是省略了 who is， 所以形成了同位语。
Exactly. It helps us create kind of a shorter sentence with more information. We could say, MT starts dating Nate. Nate is a wealthy boy from a nearby high school. But that would be a little bit awkward, you know. Yeah, and kind of boring because we're repeating Nate's name. So these clauses starting with who are a very good way of adding more information to an element of a sentence, whether it's the object or the subject. You can do it with both. Anyway, the article continues. In many ways, though, the two of them are from different worlds. Okay, so we're not talking about them being from actually different planets here. When Nate isn't an alien, we're talking about them being from very different backgrounds, so different families and different cultures.
但就很多方面来讲呢，他们两个是来自非常不同的世界。And the story says, though Nate is loving and kind, MT becomes increasingly nervous about him discovering her big secret.
Right. She becomes increasingly nervous. Now, increasingly is an adverb, and when something happens increasingly, it happens more and more. And if this word sounds like a word you've seen before, that's because we get the word increasingly from increase. Which is 增加, so that's a verb. For example, in spring, the weather gets increasingly warm. Every week, the average temperature is a little bit higher, and by summer, it's very hot. In the article, meanwhile, MT is getting increasingly nervous, so she's getting more and more nervous about her relationship. As the year goes by, she worries more and more that her boyfriend will find out who she really is, and he won't like her once he does. So here's an example sentence of how we can use increasingly. Japan grew increasingly rich between the 1950s and the 1980s.
虽然 Nate 对 MT 很好，而且人又很善良，但是 MT 却还是一天比一天更担心 Nate 会发现他的秘密。这里的 increasingly 是 increase 增加的副词，意思就是日益增长地，或者是越来越多地。像 Seb 老师的例句说，日本在1950年到1980年代期间是越来越富有。那课文这边的意思呢，就是说，可能随着他们两个越来越了解对方 ，MT 就越来越害怕她的男朋友会发现她是非法移民的这个秘密。
Yes, and she's worried that he will discover her true identity. Now, discover is a verb, and when we discover a fact, we find it out as a new information. At this point in the story, Nate doesn't know what MT's life was really like. If he suddenly found out, then we could say that he discovered that she is an illegal immigrant, because this will be new information to him. It's not stuff that he knew before. We could also call this a new discovery, which is the noun form of discover. We don't just use discover to talk about finding out facts, though. Anytime somebody finds something that is completely new, they discover it. For example, if you found a way to travel all the way around the world in just 30 minutes, then you would have discovered a way to do that. You would have found a way to do that. That's because nobody knows how to travel around the world that quickly right now. So here's another example, a good one to help us remember how discover works. When Christopher Columbus arrived in America, he thought he had discovered a way to travel to India.Discover
是动词，指的是发现，但是要注意它强调的是第一次、首次的感觉。所以今天如果只是说，我发现我上次考试全部都写错，那这种发现就只能用 find out，而不是 discover， 因为 discover 一定要是第一次的东西，像是 Seb 刚刚说的，发现一个能在30分钟内就环游世界的方法，这样就是完全没有人想到过或是做过的这种事情或是东西才能用 discover。例句就说，当哥伦布抵达美洲的时候，他以为他发现了一个去印度的方法。
Exactly. So this causes a lot of problems for them. The article says this pushes them apart. Nate dumps her at the same time that her favorite teacher quits her job. Okay, when a problem pushes two people in a relationship apart, it makes them become more and more distant from each other. They find it more difficult to spend time together, or they don't have as much fun together as they did before. They have been pushed apart. And this gets very bad for Nate and MT. Nate dumps her. Now, when we dump someone, when one person dumps another person, they break up with them. So it's like 分手 in Chinese. So Nate dumps her or breaks up with her, and her favorite teacher quits her job. And this makes things very difficult for her.
所以后来这件事情就让他们有一点渐行渐远，就是 pushes them apart. Nate 把 MT 甩了，而他最喜欢的老师也同时辞掉工作。And the article says her father has also become more aggressive than ever.
He does. He definitely does. Her father is becoming very aggressive. Now, that's an adjective, and when we call a person or someone's behavior aggressive, we mean that somebody is behaving angrily and probably threatening to hurt you. So aggression, which is the way that someone behaves to show that they are angry or violent, is the noun form of this adjective. So we can talk about somebody being aggressive, or we can talk about aggression. You don't actually have to hit someone to be aggressive toward them, though. If you speak to them aggressively, you speak to them in an angry way that makes them feel frightened, or maybe you speak to them in a very rude way that makes them very upset. But normally, the person feels scared. Now, there's a slight difference between aggressive and violent. You might have noticed I said the word violent just now. When you're aggressive, you don't have to hit someone, you just have to scare them. But when you're violent, you actually do something more physical that will actually hurt them. So if you're hitting someone, that is aggressive and violent. But if you are shouting at them, that's just aggressive.
Or you can be passive-aggressive.
Or you can be passive-aggressive, which is something which is much more common. When you're passive-aggressive, that is more like you're not going to tell someone that you're angry at them.
Yeah.
But you're not going to talk about your problems, but you're going to make them feel bad. Yeah, exactly. Are you a very passive-aggressive person,
I'm not,
Nikki?
but I've met a lot of people that are passive-aggressive.
I hate passive-aggressive people. I try my best to not be passive-aggressive.
Yeah, try not
to
to
talk
say
about
those
my
things,
problems.
yeah.
Exactly. It's very annoying when someone is passive-aggressive. Anyway, we have a slightly different example for aggressive. That dog is aggressive, so the owner puts a mask over its mouth to stop it from biting people. So that's not a passive-aggressive dog. That's a very actively aggressive dog.
那 MT 的爸爸比以前还更加凶残，对他的态度是充满攻击性。Aggressive 是形容词，充满攻击性的。所以如果我们说一个人很 aggressive， 那他可能就是讲话会很可怕，常常在威胁他人，或者是讲话很大声啊，酸言酸语，都可以说是an aggressive way of talking. 不一定要是肢体暴力才会用 aggressive， 言语上的暴力也可以算是 aggressive. 那例句中指的比较是行动上的 aggressive， 就是那只狗很具攻击性，所以它的主人必须要帮它戴上一个口罩，防止它乱咬人。
Exactly. So this is all very difficult for MT. This takes MT to a very dark place. She loses interest in her classes and starts skipping school. Right, so we have a couple of things we need to look at in these two sentences. Firstly, a very dark place. When we talk about a dark place, we're not talking about somewhere that doesn't have much light. We're not talking about a cave or going underground, or standing in the room with the lights off.
It's more of a mental thing.
It's more like a metaphor. So a dark place is a state or a situation where you feel very sad or you have very bad thoughts. So often we do it to talk about people with depression. So someone who's in a dark place might want to hurt themselves, or they might want to, quit their job, or, they're very, very sad and crying all the time. It could also be a very, something quite evil as well. A dark place could be somebody who wants to do very bad things as well. So a dark place is never a good place. Anyway, MT loses interest in her classes. She stops being interested in her classes and starts skipping school. Now, when you skip school, you don't go to school when you're supposed to. MT should be in class, but she doesn't go because she feels very sad. We could also say that she is skipping class. Both skip school and skip class translate as 翘课 in Chinese. Actually, you can skip any event that you should go to. You could skip work, skip gym practice, skip a meeting, but you can't skip a date. If you skip a date or you don't show up for a date, we say that you stand someone up, which is another very not nice thing to do to someone. You probably won't have a second date.
I'll
if
match
you stand
you.
someone. Yeah, unmatch, exactly. So here's an example sentence. When James skipped work 3 days in a row, his boss fired him. Yes, because his boss couldn't trust him to turn up for work anymore.
所以说这些事情呢，就让 MT 的情绪变得很低落。When you're in a dark place, or you have dark thoughts, your emotions are at a very, very low point. 他就开始对一切事物失去兴趣，而且还开始翘课。Skip 是动词，有跳过、略过的意思，像是我们可能会从一个话题跳到另一个话题 ，skip from one subject to another， 或者是有时候我们看 Netflix。发现编剧拖台前，我们就可以快转 skip this part of the show。那在这边是说 MT skip school， 意思就是他翘课没有去上学。那 Seb 老师这边例句提到的是翘班 skip work， 当 James 连续3天都翘班，他的老板就开除他了。
Exactly. I think I would probably fire my employee if my employee didn't come to work for 3 days in a row and didn't give me a good reason. Anyway, as things get worse, she even considers suicide. Right, so suicide is our 5th vocab word. It's a noun, and it's the act of killing yourself. So people sometimes commit suicide or 自杀 when they are extremely unhappy and they don't want to live anymore. It's extremely sad when this happens. Sometimes people don't know how to fix their problems and they think things can only get worse. It's important to remember, though, that it almost always helps to talk to someone professional if you are feeling very sad or suffering from mental illnesses such as depression, 忧郁症. That's what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. So let's look at an example sentence for suicide now. Miles attempted suicide, but he survived and is now seeing a therapist. So that word there, attempt, means to try. So he tried to commit suicide. He didn't actually commit suicide, and luckily he survived.
后来状况越演越糟 ，MT 甚至有考虑要自杀。Suicide 是名词，指的是自杀。那形容词的形态呢？它就是 suicidal， 想要自杀的，或是有自杀倾向的。所以那些想要自杀的人，可能一开始都会有一些 suicidal thoughts。如果开始会有这些念头，或者是不开心的感觉，都记得一定要寻求帮助。那例句说 ，Miles 试图自杀，但他活下来了，而且现在正在接受咨商。
So the story continues. MT keeps these thoughts from her friends and family, but she lets it slip to her best friend Chelsea.
MT 向他的家人和朋友隐藏这些想法，可是他却不小心说溜嘴，让他的好朋友 Chelsea 知道了。Keep something from someone 意思就是隐瞒，不让某人知道某件事情。You're hiding something. 那 let slip something 或是 let it slip 意思就是不小心说溜嘴，因为 slip 本来就是滑或者是溜走的意思，所以如果有东西有不小心滑出来、溜出来，意思就是你不小心讲出来了。
Exactly. And as a result, the police arrive at MT's house and take her to see a therapist.
那 therapist 是一个治疗专家、治疗师，或者是做心理咨商的医生，就是说for your mind, a doctor for your mind.
Exactly. So they take her to see someone who helps her deal with some of these problems. It's then that MT finally opens up about her situation and her life as an illegal immigrant. So this is a big changing point because eventually when she's talking to the therapist, MT doesn't have a way to not tell her about being an immigrant. She has to tell the therapist about her being an immigrant so the therapist understands why she's behaving like this.
So she opens up.
She opens up, and this creates a big change because the therapist doesn't send her away, doesn't deport her, and she starts getting some support. She starts to realize she can talk about her problems.
And then she moves away from her parents' home. With help from Chelsea's family, she achieves her dream of going to college.
Right, she achieves her dream. When you achieve a goal, a target, or an objective, you get it. So MT has achieved her dream of going to university. So that means she got into university. Let's look at an example sentence for achieve.Joyce failed to achieve a good grade in science class, even though she tried really hard.
所以后来在他的好朋友爸妈的帮助下 MT 实现了上大学的梦想。 Achieve 是动词，实现完成，尤其是在说经过一番努力之后某一方面的成功。那它的名词是 achievement， 指的就是成就或是成绩。那我们会说 a sense of achievement 用来说成就感。
And so things really work out for her, but it's not, this isn't just a story. This is something that a lot of different people go through, and we're going to find out more about that in day 3. First, though, let's look at today's For You Chat question.
For You Chat.Okay,
so today's For You Chat question is, what are some problems that only immigrants face? What can we do to help? Okay, so we can also talk, I think we can talk about some problems that especially immigrants face, because sometimes these problems, I think other people can face them too.
I think, as I just mentioned, because I was watching this show and they are immigrants, and it was really terrible because the actress, her grandma fell down the stairs, but she couldn't go to the doctors because it was so serious, but she couldn't go to the doctors because she was scared that she'd get deported. And that's really awful.
It is, because you need to I imagine she needed to go and get medical attention in that situation. Yes, that's one of the big problems is the fear. When people, like in this story, when people who are illegal immigrants get involved in domestic abuse or other kind of like private crimes, things that people can't see, they don't have a way of talking about it because they are worried that they might get found out. Although it is worth pointing out that just like in this story, just because something bad happens to you if you're an illegal immigrant, that doesn't mean that the police's first response necessarily will be deporting you. It really depends on where you are. In the US, for example, some cities deliberately have special laws saying that they won't contact immigration if they find out that you're an illegal immigrant. Other places will do it. So it really depends. I can't say anything about everywhere. But there are lots of other problems that they face. Racism is one of them, especially people coming from certain backgrounds or who look a certain way may experience more racism than others. Or culture shock. That is another big problem that I think a lot of immigrants face if they go to any slightly different country.
Maybe they have to learn a new language.
Learning a new language.
Communication problems. And
Yes, we all have slightly different ways of communicating as well. Like, for example, when I came to Taiwan at first, this is a very small, light one, but I used to live in Spain. And in Spain, when you greet somebody, you give them a kiss on the cheek. And that is not something that a lot of Taiwanese people are comfortable with. So I didn't do it very often, but I did have experience at the beginning when I went to do it because it was a habit, and then the person was uncomfortable. So then that's a very, very small example of a culture shock. But when you have all these things happening all the time, it can be very difficult. You can get stressed and annoyed because you're upsetting people or you don't understand why people are behaving different ways to you. Anyway, there are lots of other things that you guys can talk about, maybe missing your home country. Again, you could talk about the problems of learning a new language, finding a job, even though you have a foreign degree. These are lots of different things that you guys can talk about. You guys get into this For You Chat question, and we will join you again tomorrow to talk more about this book. Okay, so it's goodbye for now, but we will see you tomorrow. I'm Seb.
I'm Nikki.
And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The secret side of MT. Early in the year, MT starts dating Nate, a wealthy boy from a nearby high school. In many ways, though, the two of them are from different worlds. Though Nate is loving and kind, MT becomes increasingly nervous about him discovering her big secret. This pushes them apart. Nate dumps her at the same time that her favorite teacher quits her job. Her father has also become more aggressive than ever. This takes MT to a very dark place. She loses interest in her classes and starts skipping school. As things get worse, she even considers suicide. MT keeps these thoughts from her friends and family, but she lets it slip to her best friend Chelsea. As a result, the police arrive at MT's house and take her to see a therapist. It's then that MT finally opens up about her situation and her life as an illegal immigrant. She moves away from her parents' home. With help from Chelsea's family, she achieves her dream of going to college.
Vocabulary Review. Increasingly. The teacher became increasingly angry when none of the students could answer the simple question. Discover. While I was cleaning out my desk drawer, I discovered the watch that I thought I'd lost a year ago. Aggressive. The aggressive man kept shouting at the person who stepped on his shoes by accident. Skip. I usually skip 1 day a week at the gym to give my body some rest. Suicide. Students are under a lot of pressure these days, and some end up thinking suicide is the only solution. Achieve. Ben achieved his goal of losing 5 kilograms by eating healthy and exercising daily.
智慧小补帖
Therapist.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作。活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net